Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren and today we are going to be talking some books. All right, you guys, so it's the end of December, which means it is time for a What I Read in December 2019 update. Okay, so for those of you who have not seen my previous What I Read This Month video, I am primarily an audiobook listener. So all of the books that I'm going to be talking about today are all books that I listened to this month as an audiobook. Okay, so the first book we're going to talk about today is The Wife Between Us. Now, this book has been popping up on my library app for months, and I have been ignoring it. But a booktuber that I recently started watching talked about it on her channel, and I was like, all right, you know what? I'll give it a shot. Well, am I glad that I did? Because this book, yes, I am usually a person who can figure out the twists, and there was a twist in this book that I did not see coming. And I turned to my husband and I was like, whoa, wait. What just happened? I think this is what's going on right now. Up to that point, I was enjoying the book, but after that point, I was like, oh yeah, yes please, I cannot wait to hear more. So the blurb from this book says, when you read this book, you will make many assumptions. You will assume you know the anatomy of this tangled love triangle. Assume nothing. So this book is told through a dual perspective. You meet the main character who is engaged to a man who she is very excited to be marrying, but slowly but surely we see that there are some secrets that she has from her past, and they cause her to have a lot of anxiety and concern for people following her, looking for her, and you don't really know why. But he's very supportive and understanding, makes all the effort in the world to calm those fears and to recognize that this is something that she's going through. And so he takes steps to make sure that she feels safe. Meanwhile, while the other perspective that we're hearing from is the ex-wife of the man that this woman is about to marry, you start to find that this woman's fears may not be unwarranted. And what I really loved about this book, it really dives into the complexities between the highs of a relationship, the lows of a relationship, what happens when a relationship ends, what happens when a relationship turns out to not be what you want it to be. And I found that exploration incredibly fascinating and could not put this book down. I could not stop listening. And I really look forward to seeing more from this author. Okay, so the next book that I'll be talking about today is The Glass Castle, which I know I am very late to the game. This book came out years ago, probably like a decade ago, maybe more. But yes, finally getting around to reading this book. I didn't know much about it going in, but I had seen a trailer for the movie and I thought that I should read the book before I saw the movie. And I had recently seen someone recommend this book to a friend of mine. So I was like, oh, okay, well, let me check this book out. Whoa, this book is incredible. The story of this woman's life, Jeanette Walls, it doesn't feel like it's possible for it to be real, but this is what her life was like when she was growing up. She was one of 4 children, brought up with parents who completely rejected traditional social norms. Her father was a charismatic, incredibly smart man, and her mother was an artist and a teacher, but they did not want to follow traditional paths. And so they rejected jobs and became nomads. And as a result, Jeanette grew up as a young child, moving from place to place very often. And her parents were very hands-off when it came to the supervision and the parenting of their children. And then about the time that she got settled into middle school and high school, they became settled into one place for a long time. And you get to hear about the struggles that they went through as a family, from poverty and addiction, and the struggle of having parents who were so desperate to not conform that their children in return suffered, and what that meant for their family. So the blurb on Goodreads is a tender, moving tale of unconditional love in a family that, despite its profound flaws, yes, gave the author the fiery determination to carve out a successful life on her own terms. Jeanette Walls grew up with parents whose ideals and stubborn nonconformity were both their curse and their salvation. Her childhood was full of so much chaos, but her father was so charismatic that he was able to turn even the most dire of situations into a silver lining. And for me, her parents reminded me so much of Alexander McCandless from Into the Wild, which I have a lot of feelings about. That I won't get into right now. There are some people in this world that so desperately want to fulfill their purpose in life at any cost because it's what they want. Even when they are failing at doing that, they still will never give up and believe that their path is the right path. And it doesn't matter who gets hurt along the way. And I think that's one of the most profound things about this book is seeing how these children grow up in a home with parents who live their life this way and how they come out of it. And I think it's one of those books that sticks with you. The stories in it are just absolutely mind-boggling that these kids went through these things and came out of it on the other side. It just shows just the kind of grit and determination that the human spirit has to survive and be successful in the face of incredible challenges. So the next book we're going to be talking about is The Cruel Prince, which I discovered, again, due to a booktuber that I will link below. I am not a huge fantasy or YA reader. There are some series that I have enjoyed very much, and it's a genre that I am definitely interested in pursuing a little bit more in the upcoming year. This series is a young adult fantasy that takes place in the land of fairy. The main character is a girl named Jude who has a twin sister and an older sister, and at the very beginning of the book, they are basically kidnapped from the mortal world and brought to fairy. And the older sister is part fairy, but the two younger sisters who are twins are not fairy, and what that means for them growing up in the world of fairy. In this world, humans are usually treated as servants and not given the opportunities to live amongst the fairy. But these two girls, since they are living with a fairy who is the king's military strong arm, they are afforded the protection and the ability to be taught alongside all of the upper echelon children of fairy. And Jude is trying to carve her position into this world. And boy, does she do that. Jude is tormented by Prince Carden, who is part of the royal family, and he has such disdain and hate towards her that he makes her life miserable. And so she spends a good portion of the book trying to defend herself against him and also figure out a way to prove herself against him. This being my first dive into the world of fairy, I so enjoyed hearing about the magic and the effects that it has on humans versus fairy, and how it's even possible for a human to survive in a land like this. And it's interesting for the main character to be the only person who can't use magic, and how she is able to still be successful within that restriction. I am so looking forward to starting book 2. It just arrived in my inbox, and so that is what I will be starting this week. So excited. So the next book that I listened to was called Educated, which is sort of in the same vein as The Glass Castle. In this book, we hear the story of Tara Westover, who up until the age of 17 never stepped foot in a classroom. She grew up in Idaho with survivalist parents during the 1990s and early 2000s, during the beginnings of the Doomsday Prepper era. Her parents are radical Mormons, so her family was so radical that her father forbade medicine and hospitals and doctors. The only way the kids were able to learn things was by teaching themselves. They spent a lot of time working in the family scrapyard, which was very dangerous. There was multiple car accidents, multiple accidents at the scrapyard. None of them were ever professionally attended to. And so Tara grew up in a household with 5 or 6 brothers and sisters. One of her older brothers becomes abusive towards her. What that means to the family dynamic is explored. Eventually, Tara does leave the family home and pursues education at the collegiate level, and what that in turn means to her relationship with her family. What I took away from this memoir is that while her parents didn't stop her from educating herself, they didn't encourage it, and yet she was so determined to know more than what she did that even in the face of obstacle after obstacle after obstacle and self-doubt, and not having the resources or the privilege that comes from going to school and living a more mainstream life, she has continued to take steps and move forward. And a lot of that has to do with the people she has met along the way who wanted to lift her up and saw her potential and wanted her to succeed. And the difference between having a group of people around you who don't want to lift you up and help you and succeed versus those who do, and how we are born into our families and we don't have a choice in that, but how the people along the way, we can choose for them to be our family, and how it's important to know that we can choose who our family is, that it's not necessarily who we are born into. It is about the people who we care about and who care about us that we choose to keep in our lives. So the next book I read was, again, one that popped up in my library suggestions over and over and over again. And finally, I was just like, you know what? Let's just try it. So this is, I would probably classify it more as like a chick lit kind of read. It's called Class Mom, and it's about this snarky older mom who's kind of been through it all before. She was a young mom, and then she became a later in life mom after her girls had gone off to in college. Now she is now the mother to a young kindergartner, and she has been chosen to be the class mom, which she has done before in the past. And so the way she approaches it is with snark and humor, not wanting to take any BS from anyone. A lot of the story is told through emails and the responses in those emails. And I just love that mechanic, hearing conversations written back and forth. There is this BBC radio play that I just love that features David Tennant. It's called Love Virtually, and it's a 2-person radio play all told through emails. And I just, there's something about listening to people write to one another versus regular prose or writing in a traditional novel that there's something about it that I just really enjoyed. Now, this book, I can't say was mind-blowing, or I didn't see literally like every single thing coming down the pike, but it was still enjoyable. I definitely laughed out loud. It was a nice break after the heaviness of some of the books that I read this month. And yes, if you are looking for something light and easy, if you're a mom, if you have any idea of what it's like to try and run any kind of group, this is an enjoyable listen. And so the last book I'm going to be talking about today is another young adult fantasy series. I read the first book in this series. It's called The Bear and the Nightingale, and I am sure everybody on BookTube has been talking about it. I saw this book in the library and the cover just kept pulling me in. And so I put myself on the wait list, and finally it came through and I got to listen to it. And this story was so enchanting. It's set in old Russia, and it's set in this time period between old and new religion, the religion of the old gods versus the religion of the new God, the new Christian God. And we see the story told through third-person narrative of Vasya, who is this young, strong, independent, outspoken young girl who becomes a young woman. And we hear the story of her life in this village. Her mother has died when she was born. In the middle of her childhood, her father remarries someone of the royal family who is a devout Christian, and what that means in the family dynamic once she comes to live in their house. And things start to happen as people start to move away from the old beliefs and old gods and lean more into the Christian God, and how their fear and their worries and concern start to affect everyone around them in the village. Vasya becomes the hero of the story, who is trying to fight against these negative things that are happening as a result of these people abandoning their old belief system. This story that is told at the very beginning of this book is about the frost god Morosko, and it really sets the scene and the tone for the entire book. You hear this old ancient tale of the frost god, and these are the stories that Vasya grows up hearing her entire life from her caregiver. It really influences how deeply she believes in the old gods, and the feelings you get hearing these stories and hearing the language and description in this book. You feel everything about it. You feel the hardships that they go through. You feel the cold brutalness of their winters and the struggles that they experience. It's a very atmospheric book, and you really can feel transported while listening to this. And I am so looking forward to book 2. It's sitting in my queue, and once I finish up the book I'm currently listening to, it'll be the next thing that I start. And I'm interested in hearing where this story is going to go. There's a lot of gray area when it comes to these characters. It's not a spectrum of you are good, you are bad. There is a lot of gray area, and I look forward to seeing the development and where these characters end up along the series. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me today. If you have read any of these books, I'd love to chat with you about it down below, and tell me about some of the things you're going to be reading in 2020. I am always looking to add things to my TBR, and if you like hearing about things like this, give this video a thumbs up so I know to keep making more like them. And if you have any books that you're really excited about reading in 2020, also let me know about those down below, because I am always looking for new books to add to my TBR. All right, you guys, I'll see you next month. Happy reading. Bye.